Okay. Hello. Welcome to the video. We're here. Um, so you go ahead and step out. This is my guest. Yeah, IT helping us get ready here. So as we start this lecture, first of all, I have to apologize because I have a cold, and I'm going to have to wipe my nose, and I may sneeze. Sorry. So you don't have to worry about getting contaminated with that. And I'm in this little bitty black window here, trying to make it work, and I may have to slide back and forth, and I look like Obi-Wan Kenobi when I'm over here, and then anyway. Um, so we'll roll through this today, and nonprofits in the news, there's always something new, and I'm talking to, some of you have heard of Randy Bacon, and Randy Bacon has an organization called 7 Billion Lights, I think is what he's called. And he's got some exciting things going on. We'll share those and some other things that are happening in the nonprofit world. I didn't have any big nonprofit stories, so that's why I didn't put anything on that screen for you today. All right, so today we're talking about nonprofit governance up front because we were going to talk about that in the class the other day. And then we're going to move into later talking about 990s because that's the readings for this week. We're going to talk about the readings, and I also interviewed one of our accountants from BKD, and that's a separate link and a separate video, and I want you to watch that. Really interesting stuff and interesting talking to them. So anyway, we're going to roll through this. Now I will tell you that our room that we're recording in has a 15-minute maximum, so I'm going to be checking my watch here. So that's going to be, it's 38, about 53. So I'll have about, no, actually have about 13 minutes. And then I'm going to stop the video and we'll start it and have part two. All right, let's get into this. So I want to talk to you about boards. Those of you who were in the class last semester, several of you were in the governance class. This is kind of a review for you, and it's good to hear it again. And then for those of you who haven't been in this, this was our reading in the previous week, which we cut short because of the bad weather. The topic of nonprofits boards is my thing. It's the bread and butter of what I do. I sit on boards, I train boards, I research boards, and have really strong opinions about nonprofit boards. So boards are ultimately responsible to the people they serve, to the organization, but also in a broader sense, they're responsible to the broader community as a whole. I believe that if you're on a board, you're sort of like a state representative or an elected official in that you come into the room and you represent many people. And those people, they can't all be in that meeting, they can't all be in that room, but they're counting on you to make good decisions and good choices. So it's about accountability. It's a very big responsibility. So my friend Brian Fogel is the president of the Community Foundation of the Ozarks, and a couple of years ago he gave me this book called The Pollyanna Principles. It's a really good book. It's about serving the nonprofit community. It has a lot of interesting things. It has two big principles that I want to just bring out briefly. Principle number one is that every decision we make today is shaping tomorrow. Now, that's a good life principle, but the idea as it relates to nonprofit boards is when you're in a nonprofit boardroom, you may be thinking, boy, let's get this thing over with, let's just roll through here as quickly as we can and move on. Don't do that, because the decisions you make in that boardroom today impact a child or a family, and the well-being of that child and family then touches other people and then other people. So it might affect siblings, and it might affect his or her parents, which then could have an impact on other relatives, which could have an impact on other students in a classroom, and so on and so on. So when we're talking about our work, I want you to think about it in terms of the broader ripple effect. And also from the viewpoint that you're making decisions in the board today. So if you sat on a board, here it is 2019. What you want to have happen is somebody in, say, 20 years from now who says, no, I don't know who was on the Boys and Girls Club or the Big Brothers Big Sisters board, but I sure wish I could thank them for the important work they did, because that really changed our community. And you know, our community has people like that. guy named Schoolcraft, did great work in our community. We have other people, Lester Cox, did great work, started many things in this community. And the decisions they made, in some cases 50, 75, 100 years ago, still shaped our community today. So that's how we want boards to approach it. And then the other thing that this book talks about that I want to mention is something called the interconnectedness of our work. So the nonprofit work and the work in a boardroom is very interconnected in the sense that when we do well, then other nonprofits do well. And when they do well, then families and children do well, schools do well, and when schools are good, and then businesses good, you see the ripple effect. What I'm saying here is we're in this together. So whatever community you end up in, wherever you work, when you serve on a nonprofit board, it's not just about you. It's not just about your organization. It's actually much, much bigger because there's an interconnectedness. So we're rooting for each other, and we're in this together. Okay. And then as it relates to boards, leadership is a lot more. I mean, it is setting, and I put the compass up there because it is about setting the broad vision, but it's actually much, much more. It's about not only setting the vision, but it's also about aligning the resources to actually achieve that. I told my boss last year, she had these big ideas of all the things that I should be doing, and I like that. I like the vision. But I told her in the most kind, diplomatic way I could, vision without resources is delusion. And we want boards to get that. We want you to have the grand vision, but we want you to make sure that you're bringing in the resources to actually hit that target and to accomplish that mission. Okay, so I have this this word image, or this image of a house, and I use that because this is the process. If we're going to build a house, number one, you don't just start building. You actually decide, what is it we want? How big? How small? You make decisions. Then you plan out the cost of doing it and the resources. Then if you have all that, you might decide, where are we going to put this thing? So then you have the ground. You have to find the right size of property, the right kind of ground. Is it zoned properly? Does it have proper drainage? Is it big enough? All the things that go into it. And then you're ready to start actually the construction. You pour the foundation. After you pour the foundation, then you bring up the walls, and after the walls you put up the roof, and then you wrap the whole thing with some kind of bricks or vinyl siding or whatever you're going to put on it to protect it. This is a nonprofit organization. You don't start a nonprofit till you have a plan, till you know what it's going to cost and how you're going to do it. Then you test the ground to make sure that you're in the right community and that the need truly does exist. And if you have that, then you can actually pour the foundation. And this is where it comes into today's topic. The foundation of every nonprofit organization is, number one, the board, and number two, the CEO or executive director. If the foundation's not right, nothing else matters. You can put up the walls, you can put brick on, you can make it pretty, but in time, it's all coming down. It's not going to last. So you, as a board member, nonprofit boards are the foundation of the organizations. So we want you to think about that. We want you to think that you have to address the foundation. And in some cases, nonprofits don't have firm foundations. They spend way too much time and money on the other things, making it look pretty, putting on different siding, painting the walls. It doesn't help because in the end, it's still going to crumble until the foundation is right. Okay, oh, and I like to show this picture. So I live out in Ozark, and I actually drive by the mill, and some of you know where this is, and you've driven by it too. This is the old mill in Ozark. Now, this is old. This is way over 100 years old. Actually, this dates back to pre-Civil War days. So, I mean, Ozark's an old town, and the mill is a really old thing. If you don't know it, Johnny Morris, Mr. Bass Pro, bought the mill about a year ago, and he's completely renovating it, turning it into a Bass Pro attraction. It's going to be called Finley Farms. He's going to put restaurants and do all kinds of things. So what did Johnny do? Did Johnny come in and start renovating it? No. Johnny didn't spend a penny or an ounce on the mill until he did something else. He put these big beams underneath the mill, and literally lifted up the whole thing, and they moved it into the parking lot. Now, this is like a 200-ton building. This is no small building. But he did that because he wasn't going to spend a penny on fixing the mill or renovating the mill, or if you will, the organization, until he fixed the foundation. So what Johnny has done, he moved the mill, he completely busted up the old foundation, poured a new foundation, and even raised it higher because it's along a river. So what he did is he essentially said, the first thing to having a strong building is a firm foundation. So that translates back to the nonprofit world. If you want a firm organization, a strong organization, start where it's important. Start with the board, right? Okay. The work of a board is mainly two things, governing and supporting. So the governing is the legal. It's what you do or you might end up in jail. The support is what you do or you might not end up in heaven. So we're actually going to look real quickly at the difference between the governing part and the supporting part. So we start out by looking at the legal responsibilities of being on a board. And there are three legal responsibilities, and the first one is called the duty of care. And again, these are legal responsibilities. They're not suggestions. From the Secretary of State, they say if you want to be in compliance with the law as a nonprofit organization, you have to do these things. Number one, board members must use best judgment when making decisions about the organization, things that are really going to help the organization. Number two, look at this. You actually have to go to board meetings. You can't be on a board and not go. And not only board meetings, but special events. This is the law, by the way. If you're on an organizational board and people don't come, they need to be moved off the board. You're actually breaking the law. So you ought to have that written into your policies or your bylaws somewhere on how many meetings someone can miss, how many meetings they must attend in a year. If you're going to be on a board, you have to ask the right kinds of questions and push for the right answers. And you have to provide careful oversight, which includes, and I put over here, delegating with care and consideration. And I mean mostly on that volunteerism. You can't bring any warm body into your organization, slip a name tag on them or give them a t-shirt and just say, well, they're a volunteer, we don't have to worry about them. As a board, you have a responsibility to make sure they're properly vetted and screened and supervised. That's real important. Okay, so a lot of people on boards think they're just cheerleaders. All they do is come in and cheer on the executive director. Whatever you want, we're good with it. No, you're not just a cheerleading squad, and you're not just a notch above management. You're according to the IRS, you're a step below ownership, which means that you're going to handle the finances. You're going to handle the organization as if you owned it. And I don't mean in a power play. What I mean is you care so much about it that you're going to check into it regularly. You have ownership in it. In other words, you're not indifferent. You really do care about it. Second, legal responsibility, and then I think we're getting close on the 15 minutes. Second legal responsibility is the duty of loyalty, and it has a couple different areas. Number one, it says you won't do anything, and it says transaction, but I don't want you to think of this money only. Transaction means, it does mean money, but it also means relational transactions. You're not going to be out doing anything that hurts the organization. And I knew a guy on a board in town who was kind of a loud mouth, and he shot his mouth out a lot and tried to boss people around, and he was actually hurting the organization with his relational transactions. So in a case like that, you can't be on a board and do things that actually hurt the organization. And then the second part of this is the conflict of interest. If you're going to be on a board, you cannot be part of a conflict of interest, and I would even take that a step further and say a perceived conflict of interest. So a couple conflicts of interest. One conflict is you can't do business with a board member unless you go through the proper steps. So if you want to expand your organization and build a new wing or a new building, and you have a board member who's owner of a construction company, you can't just give the job to the board member. Now, it's possible that board member could actually submit a quote like anybody else in the community. It's possible that that could happen, but you can't just give it to that board member because he or she's on the board. So that board member would have to submit a quote and would have to step out of the process while it's going on. And then another possibility for a conflict is you don't want to have, you can't have anybody on the board who's related to somebody who works for the organization. It's also best not to have spouses, husband-wife teams on the same board. That is not good. That's a conflict as well. And just one step further, you want to avoid having someone on your board who is also on the board of a competing nonprofit. Then they have to decide who they're going to help. Which one are they going to tell about the new donor in town or the new grant that just came available or whatever opportunity there is out there. So you want to make sure as a board that you don't have that kind of conflict. Okay, we have just hit the 15-minute mark. I'm stopping this one and we'll start part 2.